Perfect. Can you see my screen right now?
Yeah, sure.
All right, perfect. So in today's learning outcome, what we're going to go through understanding what the role of the legal and ethical issues are in developing the human resource policies. Obviously, there are many legalities that we need to have, a look on before we even put a policy in place or before we even start with the HR planning. For example, as I mentioned in the previous lectures and the learning outcomes, what we do is, every company can have a different policy for, say, paternity policy. So remember, I mentioned in the UK, there are a few companies that might give you 20 days because that's the minimum statutory requirement by the government. So that is a legal policy essentially. And some companies might give you a month as well because, yeah, they might give you additionally, apart from 20 days, they want to go, the extra mile and just help their associates a little bit more. So that's just a very basic and simple example of the role that legal policies play in human resource planning. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah,
Perfect. Also, I'll give you another example as well. Like, I'm talking about the UK laws as of now. Obviously, every country has their own different laws. So if there's a company that is based globally, all right, it has
yeah,
branches in the US, UK, India, just giving a basic example. They might have to keep their laws consistent throughout in terms of HR planning, but they'll have to modify their laws according to each country's legalities. So, for example, in India, um, we have a simple law that after every 7.5 hours, you need to give your associate certain amount of break because they believe that the associates are going to be run down then. But in the UK, anyone who's aged over 18 after 6 hours or between 6 hours essentially is legally required to be given a 30-minute break by their
yeah,
organization essentially.
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so basically, and in the US it might, obviously the law might be different. So they have to make sure that their laws stay consistent throughout. So maybe the easier way to tackle this would be companies would be like, you know what, after or between your 8-hour working day, all associates are entitled to an hour break to make things consistent. And that would basically cater for the UK law, cater the Indian laws, and as well as the US laws. So that's one example, a very simple and basic example when I'm talking about HR planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's okay.
Perfect. So we already spoke about what HR planning is. It essentially is it's a continuous ongoing process. You probably would have to make changes to it, bi-weekly changes or monthly changes to your plans as well, because obviously you have so many factors influencing a company to grow. There might be simple factors that, market plays a role. For example, globalization, you have recession going on last year. There were so many factors that played a vital role in the company's human resource plans. I don't know if you're familiar or this happened in the UAE as well, but this was very prominent in the UK because of recession or essentially the cost of living going really high. Companies were trying to cut down costs, and they were doing that by letting go of their associates. So there were so many people who were made redundant. Do you know what redundancy means?
Returners, could you please explain little?
No problem. So redundancy essentially means that if you're at a job role for like maybe a year or two, or maybe even 10 years, okay, it doesn't matter how long you've been at that job role for, they will make your role redundant. So, for example, if I am an HR administrator and I'm working in this company, and if my role is made redundant, that means that they do not have anyone as an HR administrator anymore. They have completely wiped out that role.
Mhm.
That's why, obviously, indirectly meaning that they have removed me out or fired me. But we call it redundancy because it's not the person being, let go. It's the role that they're letting go of because the company can't afford an HR administrator anymore.
Redundants meaning termination or removing like this, right?
Yeah, but termination is removing someone because they did something. For example, if you did not follow the company policy or you are not able to perform that well, they might terminate your employment.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
redundancy means they wipe out your role completely. That means there is no one that's going to replace you after that. They do that
Ah,
because they can't afford having someone in that
ah,
position anymore.
in other words, they are removing this seat, a
Yeah,
position.
exactly. This position, exactly. That
Yeah,
position is gone. So because they can't afford, or they don't have the resources to basically pay for that job anymore.
yeah. That's understood.
Perfect.
Nice.
So that is what was happening last year a lot, which was affecting HR planning, because obviously, as an HR department, they were supposed to make those decisions in terms of redundancy, and they had to carefully look at the company organization chart and check if they, for example, let go of an HR administrator, then who is going to take their role on, and how is that role going to be handled or managed going forward.
Yeah.
So obviously that planning is continuously changing. Every, probably every other month, there were changes to the plans. Where I used to work in a previous workplace, there were so many people made redundant because of that reason, because the company couldn't afford it anymore.
Hmm.
So usually also people who are at a higher position are targeted for redundancy because, taking that one higher position role, maybe if someone is at, an 80K salary, and if they
Yeah.
are made redundant, then instead of them, they can basically hire people who might be, fresh graduates, or, people who might, be fresh or new to employment, so at the same role, but at a 30K pay.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
So,
sense?
so it's mean the HR department is losing repute, or what you can say, like they did not need more the HR responsibilities, or what you will discuss or explain like this. What we can consider from this, if there is no importance more for the HR, they are returning the positions, and what you can say. I just
So for
need to know
example,
little.
it wasn't just HR that were made redundant. There were people in IT, people in sales, marketing, everywhere that were made redundant. But HR was doing all the planning. For example, as a plan or as a HR plan, if in the IT department there are 10 people and they are at different levels and different roles, and if we make, one person redundant from those 10 people, will the IT department still function the same way? That is what HR planning would mean.
Yeah.
They're not just targeting people from HR to be made redundant. Was that your question?
Yeah, actually, my question is that I need to know the importance of the HR department.
Oh, okay, makes
Suppose,
sense.
yeah,
So,
because it's mandatory in the companies or not, or they are going to redundant from the HR or all the department. And what is the meaning of? Are you just give me the meaning of redundant? Are you overall talking about this importance of the department?
oh no. So basically, I was talking about how HR planning plays a role, and also trying to explain how, because of market changes, HR might
Yeah.
have to make difficult decisions and change their plans. So they might have to make people redundant. And this
Yeah.
might target not just the HR department, but all of the departments across the business.
Yes.
Perfect. So basically, we spoke about in LO1 what HR planning was. It was basically aligning the HR plans to the organization plans and working simultaneously side by side. So
Yeah.
what the HR department's job is essentially to push the entire team to do better, not just the HR team, but even the IT, sales, marketing, every other team in the business.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned to you, I think it was in LO2 that I mentioned about HR business partners.
Yes.
Perfect. So you remember that you have specific HR representatives for every department that are specializing in that specific, role, or they understand that specific department, how it functions. So for
Yeah.
example, these IT jobs, if I don't have any experience with IT, I wouldn't really understand how it works, because they need to use, different softwares, different functions. They hire programmers. It's a very different genre that they hire, right? So there might
Yeah.
be someone in the HR department that might specialize in, taking care of IT. So, everything from hiring, taking care of them, how the department functions. If, some associate is just, fallen sick and is not coming to the job for like a month, so that HR business partner would take care of all of the issues for that specific department.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And
So
but this is this is not this one is what you are explaining, HR business partner. Mostly here in Qatar, in 80%, 90% organization, it's not happen.
Oh, really?
Maybe 5% organization having this position, HR business partner for the specific job role.
Okay, makes sense.
Mostly, mostly one HR is controlling all the function in the HR, not like HR business partner or
Got
like
it.
this.
So maybe
Yeah,
it also depends on organization structure, organization size, how
yeah,
much, how much load the HR department has.
yes, yes, yes,
Depending on
yes.
that as well, they hire, HR business partners or not. Otherwise, they just have an HR administrator taking care of most of the departments and the
Mm.
functionings of it.
Yeah, yeah. I give you little real example of my
Yeah.
organization.
Go on.
Suppose
Yeah.
here, yeah, suppose here we are working in HR,
Mm-hmm.
but here we distribute HR in different departments. Like employee relation is another department
Yeah.
who deal only staff, and
Makes sense.
labor relation is another department, but it's from HR who deal
Yeah.
only labor, non-staff. So it's labor category people
Got it.
deals. And we
Makes
have
sense.
learning and learning department is a separate, learning and development, and this recruitment is separate. So like this we have divisions in HR.
Makes sense. So exactly how you have divisions in your company. So you mentioned
Yeah,
you have someone who manages ER cases, which is the employees cases, someone who
yeah,
has labor relations. Are you into labor relations?
yes, I am in the
Yeah,
labor
you had
relation.
mentioned to me last time, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes,
And
yes,
obviously, there's
yes.
someone in the learning and development department, someone in recruitment. Exactly
Yeah,
that way, they might have, some organizations might, some organizations might not. They might have an
yeah,
additional department or a section in HR known as HR business partners. So there might be 7, 8 people in that, group, basically catering to different departments across the business.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Perfect. So yeah, basically HR planning needs to have so many things in mind. So it obviously looks at the external factors, which is the legalities and the market, recession, all of this, but also needs to make sure that the internal basically the organization, how what they have thought of, the strategic plan of the organization internally, they need to align their plans with that as well.
yeah.
Perfect. Now, in this slide, we're just going to quickly go through the different factors that they consider before they come up with a plan. So I have already gone through quite a bit with you in terms of giving you some examples and, also talking about how the organization structure is. I will try to relate it to the example that you just spoke to me in terms of, you having an ER department, a labor relation department, L&D and recruitment.
Yes,
These are
yes.
the 4 that you said you have, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I will try to relate my examples to that as well so that you can have a better understanding. And, maybe that'll just give you a realistic picture in terms of how this works or how the functions go on.
yeah,
But yeah, we talked about there are basically divided into different broad steps. So you have the planning process, which is obviously done based on the strategic plan of the organization, but it's divided into different steps. So you look at the current HR supply, meaning that you look, if you're just in this example, I'm just going to take recruitment. I'm not going to look at the other different departments in HR. Is that all right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Perfect. We'll do that. So, for example, if you're looking at recruitment and they're looking at the current HR supply, so what they're going to look at is looking at doing an in-depth study of the organization and understanding what they currently have. So, in terms of what skills their current associates or employees already have, what all they can improve on in terms of remember in LO2, I spoke about how we can look at giving proper training and development to our current associates so that they can expand in their job role.
Yeah,
So this is basically looking at their previous experiences, looking at how, they can basically brush up some skills and take on additional responsibilities if required, because internal progression is a very big thing, in most of the companies, because hiring gets so expensive. Hiring someone new is really expensive because you spend some resources. The recruitment team spends resources in terms of hiring them. Then obviously you have to train them. They probably take 2-3 months to adjust to the organization, and then they start giving results. So hiring actually gets expensive. Instead, what they do is they take their current employees, they look at the skill sets, what they have currently, and then they try to basically push them to basically get better training, or just, for example, if you're an associate, they might push you to go to a managerial role, and that might be a career progression for you. So they look at all of that. Also, they look at the compensation, what benefits they're providing. So that's what they need to look at currently, what they actually have in the organization. And then the second step is basically analyzing or doing some, they use different softwares to do that as well. Have you heard of Power BI?
Power BI?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I am not well aware about this one.
No problem at all. What Power BI does is, this is just a little off topic, but I'll explain if you want to know. It's
Yeah, sure.
It's basically a software through Microsoft itself. What it does is it's very similar. It's similar to Excel because it's got Excel formulas as well. But how Excel shows you everything in data format, Power BI shows you everything in a visual format. So if you put in the numbers, you might probably get a proper graph, proper bars, pie chart, everything already designed in that software. So that helps the HR department with essentially salary benchmarking. So salary benchmarking meaning if I am paying my associate, say 20,000, 20K for this job role for the year, salary benchmarking would essentially mean me analyzing the current market, looking at what my competitors are paying their associates for that specific job role, and doing basically an analysis in terms of if my salaries or the rates that I provide to my associates are at par with the market rates, because that's another reason as well why associates leave, right? If they're not getting paid enough or they're not getting paid well for the job that they're doing or the input that they're giving, they might want to look at different companies or different organizations that pay them more for the same role. So that's why they usually do salary benchmarking every 2 years, wherein, for example, IT jobs after COVID, the prices, like the salaries of IT people have gone really high. So if you're joined a company, say 5 years ago, and you were getting paid £30,000, cut to now, so you started with 30,000. Probably after 5 years, every year you get, an increase in your salary, and now you're at say 37 or 38. For you, that might be, from 30 to 38, I progressed in like 4-5 years, which is a big deal. But maybe the current market for the same job is running at 45 or 50,000. So that's where also associates lose on. That's why all these big organizations, associates usually ask for salary benchmarking reviews to be done every year so that they know that their salary is at par to the current market rate and they're not getting underpaid for the job that they're doing.
Yes.
Perfect. Coming back to the point, so what they do is they do an analysis using these softwares, and also keep in mind, people that might have to leave for, retirement, promotion, many things that they keep in mind. Maternity leaves. There are so many things that, associates might leave in a big organization, and obviously layoffs. And then they see how many associates they might require in maybe the next 2 years. So they start making their plans accordingly. So if in the next 2 years we have a target of hiring 20 new associates, all right? I might basically start hiring every month one new person, but I will also have to keep in mind or bear in mind that there might be layoffs, people might leave, people might retire, there might be people going on maternity leave. So I need to keep, or basically might have to hire 25 people instead in the next 2 years because of all of these factors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions at this point for me?
No, but I have one thing here to with you practically as I'm working in
Go on. Yeah.
HR here in my organizations. You see, we HR only just thinking about the salary market, and mostly we are trying to reduce the salaries. But you see, in suppose before 5 years, we
Yeah.
have the same salary, and after 5 years, the things are going to lot of high expensive prices.
Yeah.
So we are going to deduct the salaries again. So what will
Oh.
be the scenario for the workforce? So this is I was thinking just I need to share with you. So mostly it's happened. The companies prefer to deduct the salaries through HR, but they are not thinking about this the materials before which have price like $5. After 5 years, it's gone price to $10.
Yeah.
Though as per this market change, the salary should be high, not deduction. So just we are thinking about the benefit of the companies.
Definitely. And I think this is a very good point that you raised, because I feel that this is also happening because there is recession going on.
Yeah.
So what So essentially, what recession essentially means is that during this specific period of time, the GDPR of that company, for example, if you're talking about UAE, so the GDPR of UAE is going down a little, because of which the cost of things is raising up, but your salaries are not raising at the same level or at par according to the cost of living.
Yes,
So
yes.
that essentially is the meaning of recession, that you can't catch, because basically, as you mentioned, something might be $5 before, it's 10 now, which is absolutely
Yeah.
correct. That is happening. But your salaries have not gone up by 50%, right? Your salary must have
Yeah.
gone up by like 10% or 15% in the last 5 years.
And maybe reduction.
Yeah, definitely. And in some cases, there might be reduction as well. I feel
Yeah.
like if that's continuously happening, there might be a point wherein the workers, especially the labor workers, might actually, start with a little protest or something, saying that, this is
Yeah.
unfair.
Mostly then we need to face these strikes
Yeah,
and
you would
lots
have
of
to.
problematic happenings.
I don't know if you've heard, but in the UK, the cost of living crisis, like basically the prices have gone so high that
Yeah.
we are having so many labor workers that work the trains in the UK, the buses. All of these people are going on strikes. So we recently, if you can Google and read more about it. But the UK, every other month or every other few weeks, we're having train strikes. So we're having
Yeah.
workers who have worked in, basically running the trains or everything to do with the railway. They're going on strikes because they're saying that they're not being paid enough. We have doctors or NHS. We have basically our people who work in the medical sector. We call them NHS. So
Yeah.
NHS workers or medical sector workers are also going on strikes because the government's not paying them enough.
Yeah.
So that's already been faced in the UK. So if that continuously keeps happening, it might happen in UAE as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you understand how they analyze the current supply and then the future HR demand, right? The first 2 points.
Yeah. Understand.
And then demand forecasting essentially is creating an idea or a rough plan that in the next 2 years, I might, like I gave the example, I might have to hire 20 new associates because my company is expanding. So that is demand forecasting, or basically what I mentioned, that we can use different softwares to analyze, you know, our future demands or future hiring strategies. We need to plan that in the future, in advance. So that is how demand forecasting helps. Forecasting for the future, essentially.
Okay.
Perfect. And then the last bit is HR sourcing strategy and implementation. So basically, what happens is, now that we have a plan that, all right, we currently have these many associates, even if they go on to progression and, they're getting trained and all, we still have to hire, say, 10 new associates. And that's the forecasted demand that we have set. So at the end, we'll have to look at a strategy or a plan to put in place or implement it in terms of maybe If you're looking at hiring 10 associates in the next 2 years, so every year you might have to hire at least 5 to 6 new associates, get them trained, get them started. We also need to bear in mind that there might be few people who might, leave the organization because maybe, they are getting better offers somewhere else, or they might not really be able to be working to the level at which we want them to work. So keeping all of these things in mind, we have to start with how are we going to source these leads or these job roles, how are we going to fill them? And that's how we come up with a strategy or a plan. And then how we implement that is also a new task, because you might come up with a plan saying that you want to hire 5 new people, in the organization this year. But how are we supposed to do that? Which department do we want to hire them in? What role or what position at which they're going to come? Their salaries, everything needs to be basically put into place and implemented.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. Going on, as I mentioned, there are many factors that play a role while putting different plans in place. We spoke about a few factors in the slides above. I'm going to quickly run through these different factors as well. So we have, just give me 1 second. I want to make sure that this call doesn't end at 2. All right, Kuram, if the call ends at 2, I might give you a normal call quickly and send you a new link. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
Because it's scheduled till 2 o'clock, but I'm not sure if it keeps running through or gets stopped in the middle.
Okay, no problem.
Perfect. So, yeah, again, I was talking about the few internal influences on basically the strategic plans or the HR plans essentially. So internal influence might be the company changing its strategic objectives. So the corporate objectives might change. They might make some new changes to it, might see how, like I mentioned last year, there were so many people made redundant. So this example says that how HR might want to implement redundancies, or they might relocate jobs. So they might be like, all right now, Kuram, you're working for labor relations, but we feel that you might do a good job working for employee relations as well. So they might relocate you. So those are internal influences that plays a factor in HR planning. Is that clear?
Yeah, clear.
Perfect. If you have any doubts, just feel free to stop me immediately.
No problem.
Then you have operational strategies. For example, again, I've covered all of these bits, but I'm just going to quickly run you through it again. So operational strategies might be the company coming up with a new system in place. For example, I think in LO2, I mentioned that there was, people who might be in the age group of 45 to 55, they might struggle if a new software is implemented into place. So that's one of the example of operational strategies, wherein if there's a new system in place, there might be, new training required, or maybe the newer staff might understand it easier, but the older age group might take a little time to adjust to the new systems coming in place.
Yeah.
Then you have marketing strategies wherein, for example, if there's an organization selling, say, I don't know, chocolates, all right, they might come up with a new variety or a new flavor, and they might have a new strategy for it. So for that, they might have a new sales team that's been considered. So that's just one of a marketing strategy then.
Yeah.
Apart from that, you have financial strategies. For example, if the company has decided to just reduce costs, there might be more redundancies, right? Or
Yeah.
they might think of reducing costs and be like, you know what, the training team can just, be wiped out. We might just externally get people if we need our associates to be trained, because they might feel like having a training team in place for the entire year is not that helpful to them. They might only need training every 6 months for their associates. So that's just one decision for the company reducing costs. So that's a financial strategy in place then.
Yeah.
Perfect. Then obviously we spoke about few external influences already. So you have market changes, wherein there are changes in the market. Like I mentioned last year, there were so many people made redundant. You're competing with your competitors. You want to basically do better in your market. So that's an example as well. Then obviously we spoke about economic changes, like you just gave me an example of the recession. So how recession puts a very big pressure, not just on the associates, but also on the staff. So how basically people might not be able to afford every little thing that they were before, because obviously the salary is not increasing, but the cost of living, or basically the cost of goods, basic necessities are going higher.
Yeah.
So that might be one of an example as well. Then you have technological changes. So again, that's very similar to the one that I spoke before, that there might be changes. For example, in the last few years, new social media like Instagram, TikTok, all of these have gone so much higher. People have started using them way more than what we used to before, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, before we used to use Facebook more, now we're using Instagram more. So there might be so many changes, and this is just a very basic example I'm giving. There might be an entire technological change. For example, before, we used to we never had contactless cards before, right? For making payments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for example, if there's a company that deals with financial technology or, with card payments and stuff, for them, that might be a very new technological change. Because before, people used to pay in a different way, but nowadays there is contactless, there's, OTP, there's Paytm, all of these new things. Is, are you familiar what Paytm is?
Paytm?
Yeah.
No, I don't know about this.
No problem. So Paytm is a thing in India. It basically means there's a QR code.
Yes,
So you
yes.
can easily scan that QR code and pay anyone. So for
Oh,
example, if there's a vendor sitting on the street, selling coconut water, he might
yeah.
have a little scanner as well. You just need to scan that code and easily the money will go in his bank account.
That's okay.
So
Okay.
this
Okay.
is a new technological change which the Indian government had to tackle, because they were like, how do you tax people if the money goes straight in like that then, but they're actually running a business. So
Yeah.
every new technology plays a new role in the business as well.
Yes, nice.
Then you have social changes, wherein you have social changes might, I want to give you for example, someone who went on maternity leave and came back, okay, might tell you now that I have a child, she might be working for you for 6, 7 years. She took a maternity leave, she came back, and she's now requesting for a flexible working request, basically saying that, is it okay if she can work 2 days from home and 3 days in the office? So that might be a flexible working request, because she might say that, these 2 days, I don't have any help to basically take care of my child. But if I'm working from home, I can also just, oversee my child and also do my job.
Yeah.
So that's just a social change that might happen. And then, as we spoke in the starting of this lecture, the political and legal changes. So, like, changes to the employment laws, rights of associates, minimum wage that's required to be given to them. That obviously will make a, impact on the overall HR planning.
Yes.
Perfect. Now you need to basically, this slide says that how HR requirements are different from the organization's requirements. So I think this, we already know that HR planning is based on the organization's strategic plans, but at the same time, it's not same or similar to it, because HR planning might also be pushing associates doing better, and they might so many other things that they might put in place, which obviously aligns with the organization's strategic goals and objectives. But at the same time, HR has to think about various other things into place as well. They might have to worry about learning and development as well. Might have to worry about people, you know, people going on sick leave. There are so many cases in big organizations, especially wherein associates go on for sick leave for, say, I don't know, months altogether. So how to bring
Yeah.
them back? Because obviously they can't just let go of them directly, because they might do, an employment law case or something. So they have to properly see, because obviously, if, for example, someone's suffering from, say, a very deadly disease, say cancer, right? And they are not able to join their work back for like 2, 3 months. So obviously, if the company lets go of them, for example, in the UK, that person can easily put a case of discrimination, because the company knew that he was suffering from a disease, but at the same time let go of him without actually considering, the implications that will be to his health.
Yeah.
So HR needs to keep so many additional things in mind that might be different from the strategic plans. So they work hand in hand, but at the same time, they look at many more things that are broader. And then again,
Yes.
as we spoke about, they need to see the demand of the, employees that they already have, the supply to the labor market. That's obviously going on. Just going to show you this table that will help you understand. So there's a proper business planning process. So you have the strategic plans that are put in place. There are many things that they consider while making these decisions. The higher business leaders basically make these plans by looking at the perspectives in terms of they do an environmental scan, look at their competitors, they look at, proper plans in place, how the organization strategy needs to be put in place, what resources would be required. If they're wanting to expand, then how are they going to do that? And then obviously they also look at keeping a check on the budget, looking, controlling how much they're going to spend and how much they need to make. So all of these factors are done in the business planning process, which is the first three boxes on the top. And then the HR plan is aligned based on these processes. So for example, the strategic plan is analyzed by the business. What the HR plan does is they look at the business needs and then they look at the external factors that would affect these business needs. And then they
Yeah.
also look at then the staffing that's going to be required, or basically they analyze the demand and supply of not just the labor markets, but also the markets, not just internal labor markets, but also external ones. So they have a look at what staff they require in the future and how they can get that staff. They might look at getting in touch with recruitment agencies, or they want to do in-house hiring, or they have to design new job roles if they're looking at expanding, or they might have to cut down few job roles if they're looking, if the business organization plan is looking at cutting it down.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end, they have different action plans in terms of, how are they going to hire new people, or if they're training their current staff, how are they going to do that? And how are they properly going to compensate them so that the current staff doesn't essentially leave the business?
Yeah.
Now, this is again very similar to what I just explained, but this is it's just a model of basically manpower planning. So it talks about looking, as I mentioned before, so I'm just going to quickly go through this, but if you have doubts, then I can explain in depth as well again. Just let me know. So this basically just explains that you have your external environment or internal environment. What you do is you have an analysis in terms of the organization strategies, how it aligns with the external strategies, and do an external and internal manpower supply analysis as well. So as we spoke before, and you
Yeah.
align all of this with the organization strategies. And then in the end, after you're looking at your current supply, you're going to look at the demand, that how you're going to basically fulfill, the need for new people, or the need for, say, 10 more laborers to work in this production department. And so you link the demand and the supply together, and then you are basing your manpower plans on the current demand and supply that's needed.
Yeah.
Is this all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've just taken an example of, production department, but this can be applied to any different department. You can be finance, marketing, sales, so on and so forth. Then we're coming to the part wherein it says how to develop a human resource plan for an organization. So again, this is very similar to this slide that I showed you. Just going to take you back now. It says that you have a company strategic plan. You align the company strategic plan to the HR, HR aligns the HR strategic plan to the company strategic plan, and they come up with the HR plan. Now, throughout this entire planning, the company's plan and the HR plans go hand in hand. But as we mentioned previously, the HR planning might require so much in-depth work. Like apart from just the basic plan in terms of pushing people to do better, hitting your targets, hitting your goals, they might have to do as we mentioned previously, a strategic analysis of, say, the current salaries that are on the market. If they're in line with the competitors, they might have to identify different HR issues. For example, some companies conduct stay interviews or exit interviews. So stay interviews meaning, you have just recently joined the business. It's just been 6 months. You have, just not even cleared your probation. So we are conducting a stay interview with you because since you're a newcomer or a fresh person, you can give us new perspective on how our business runs and if you have any issues. And obviously, an exit interview might mean that since you're leaving the organization, we want to know what made you decide to leave and how, as an organization, we can improve. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? So that's how HR also identifies some HR issues and how they can deal with it and change it. And then they keep a check in terms of which issue needs, current prioritization. So they obviously what requires current or urgent requirement now, and then they plan their actions accordingly. And that's how they basically make an HR or strategic plan. So the HR plan might essentially include, the needs of the organization. I'm just going to take hiring, for example. So what all people do they need to hire? How are they going to recruit and select them? And after they've come in the organization, how do you look at training them properly? And also need to look at them getting compensated fairly for their job role and looking at, pushing them to be the best version of themselves or in terms performing better for the organization. So there are many things that you need to keep in mind while making an HR plan. Does this chart now make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. We're almost at the end of this presentation. Now, these are the parts that I already spoke about in this slide previously. So this has every little bit that I explained. It talks about how to determine human needs. So we obviously need to see our plans and see what all, associates we might need. Then you base your recruiting strategies on those needs. Then obviously you need to see how you select your associates, your hiring process, and then you develop them. So you have now got the associates, but you properly need to give them training for them to understand their job role properly. And then obviously your compensation should be, firstly, they're paid decently. And also nowadays, people are very big on getting extra benefits. So some companies have healthcare, some companies have child, insurance, they have some extra bits. They might give you some, you know, extra holidays or leaves, stuff like that. So that's a compensation plan. They might give you a company car. That's your entire compensation because it comes with your pay. You're getting these additional benefits.
Yes.
And then obviously, once you have set the standards for them, like this is what you need to do in your training, you need to make sure that they're continuously doing better and pushing them to do, just the best version of themselves.
Yes.
Now, this again is very similar to the table that I showed to you. It talks about, again, the same things: recruiting, training them, how they develop new resources, performance appraisal, and compensation review. And again, I think I mentioned these bar bits to you in terms of in compensation review, what they do is they have benchmarking that they do. That I told you, they use a software. They see if your salary is in alignment with your competitor's salary. And then they look at the salaries for everyone, for managers, general managers, all of them. And then obviously they might have help from a recruitment agency if they want to hire more people, or they have a proper report in terms of, you might have to present a report that these are our salaries now, and this is what our predicted salaries would be in the next 4-5 years. That's how they do a proper report and compensation review.
Yeah.
So those are the various factors that influence HR plans. They can be legal, they can be internal, external, based on what our competitors are doing. So there are so many things that affect the HR planning essentially. So this is the end of the learning outcome number 3. Do you have any questions for me as of now?
No, it's okay. You explain well.
Perfect. I'm glad that
Yeah.
you had a good session. Thank you so much for your time today, Kuram. I'm going to see you tomorrow again. We
Yeah,
have a
sure.
session from 1 to 2.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. All right, then. I'll see you tomorrow for the learning outcome number 4.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.